A few Bruins had some nice showings at the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo over the weekend, but how do we really evaluate where these guys are at?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked Beat. Today is Tuesday, September 17th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. Now, the Bruins partook in the Prospects Challenge in Buffalo over the weekend, and a few guys really stood out, some names that we could see in NHL level black and gold sooner than later. But before we discuss a few of those guys, I thought it was important to look at how we evaluate the readiness of NHL prospects. It involves analyzing a variety of factors to determine if they're prepared to make the jump to the NHL or even to the AHL. You see a lot of guys putting up impressive showings at a rookie tournament or a prospects challenge, but we have to remember that they're playing against other rookies and prospects from other teams who have varying degrees of depth to their prospect pools. The Bruins are a team, an organization that has a fairly thin prospect pool, albeit with some guys who could very well make the jump one day. But in terms of who was playing in Buffalo this weekend, there's maybe 3-4 guys who we might eventually see playing for the Boston Bruins, barring complete surprise. A few things that need to be taken into account. One of them being physical maturity. Prospects need to be physically strong enough to handle the grind of an 82-game season, much more than they're used to playing in junior, college, and withstand the physical demands of playing against larger, stronger players in the NHL level. Players must demonstrate stamina to compete at a higher level over extended periods, especially in longer shifts during the Stanley Cup playoffs. And players with a history of injuries may need extra time to fully develop their bodies before facing NHL-level competition. I look at Georgi Merkulov last season, so many people saying he's tearing up the AHL, he deserves to be called out, to be put in a prime spot. But there's such a big difference between playing against AHL competition versus playing against NHL competition. And just because you're scoring seemingly at will at the AHL level doesn't mean it's going to translate to the NHL level. And that's certainly the case for some of these prospects who could be carving up New Jersey Devils prospects in Buffalo. But when it comes to making the leap to the AHL and further to the NHL, it takes a certain amount of time, to be sure. Skating is another one. The NHL is so fast, players must be able to keep up with the pace, especially with today's focus on speed and skill. Being able to quickly change direction, maintain balance is so crucial. And backward skating, positioning. The Bruins, of course, value two-way forwards, and that defensive skating and effective play without the puck is what is going to set players apart. Decision-making, your hockey IQ. You have to show an ability to process the game at a high speed and make quick, smart decisions, both offensively and defensively. Understanding where to be on the ice, both with and without the puck, is critical. Good positioning helps maximize scoring chances and minimize defensive lapses. Being able to read the play and predict what will happen next is a sign of a high-level hockey intelligence that I mean, obviously this is a high bar, but you look at Wayne Gretzky, he was able to look 2-3 moves ahead, 2-3 passes ahead, and anticipate where to be or where his teammates would be as he was coming in with the puck. Your skill level obviously has to be high. Puck handling, the ability to control and protect the puck in high pressure situations, an accurate, quick release is critical. One guy in particular did show that over the weekend. We'll talk about that coming up. Playmaking. Forwards and defensemen have to demonstrate strong passing skills. Forward to be able to find guys near the net, defensemen to be able to break out the puck and initiate those clean zone exits and entries. Consistency, you have to be able to maintain a high level of performance over an extended period of time. These short bursts of offensive flair aren't enough. Consistent play is key. And NHL players have to adapt to different styles of play, opponents, and systems. Can the prospect adjust to changing circumstances during games and throughout the season, game to game as well? There's a mental toughness that you have to have. Players will face increased scrutiny in the NHL. Evaluating their ability to handle pressure, both on and off the ice, is critical. A willingness to improve, work hard, and learn from mistakes, especially with the Boston Bruins. Hard work, putting in the work outside of the rink, outside of game and practice time is so important in this Boston Bruins culture. And resilience. How does a prospect respond to adversity like a slump, an injury, mistake, getting a 4-game call-up, being sent back down? Resilience is so very important. Now, it's a special prospect that's able to jump right to the NHL level and excel, like your Connor Bedards, your Connor McDavids. A prospect's performance in a pro league like the AHL or even overseas can offer valuable insight. Excelling at lower levels is often a stepping stone to NHL readiness, but does not necessarily guarantee NHL readiness because, again, there is a difference in those stepping stone leads and getting to the Rock, which is the big league of the NHL. And, of course, performance in NHL training camps, preseason games provides a chance to assess how well a prospect competes against NHL caliber players. That's where you see a Georgi Merkulov, Fabian Lysell, Matt Poitras kept out of this prospects challenge, so they will be ready for training camp and to step into those preseason games. Of course, expert opinions do count as well. Scouts, coaches will evaluate a player's readiness based on their day-to-day performance in practices and games, offering insight that may not show up in statistics or that we may not catch watching on a live stream from Buffalo. So all of these factors are weighed and teams can make informed decisions about when a prospect is ready to make the leap to the NHL. We can sit on X or Twitter and say, this guy's ready. They're making a mistake by not calling this guy up. They're making a mistake by signing a Tyler Johnson instead of just playing the kids. All of this stuff goes into measuring whether or not these guys are ready. And there were a few guys, in fairness, that did stand out in Buffalo, and we'll touch on them here as the podcast continues. The NFL season is well underway, and FanDuel is giving you a fantastic opportunity to check out all the action. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and they have something a little different for us right now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook, bet that $5, and get that 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please do subscribe to become a daily listener. Now, having said all that about how to evaluate prospects, there were a few guys that did indeed stand out in Buffalo. And one guy that I wanted to give props to is Brett Harrison. He's a guy that was drafted in the third round of the 2021 entry draft. And this was, it's still a bit of an issue, but this was at a time when the Bruins weren't drafting a ton of guys out of the OHL. Harrison at the time was projected to go a bit higher than the third round. He has offensive upside, as he showed in 2022-23 with the Oshawa Generals and Windsor Spitfires of the OHL with a combined 34 goals. And he showed that offensive ability over the weekend in Buffalo. Harrison had a goal and an assist against Pittsburgh Penguins prospects. He added a goal against Columbus Blue Jackets prospects and then had another goal versus New Jersey Devils prospects on Monday. So a goal per game for Harrison during this prospects challenge. And he showed some real leadership, offensive upside. He had his first full season in Providence last year with 5 goals, 9 assists for 14 points in 47 games. So again, going back to that pro experience, I expect a bigger, better season from Harrison. And he's a guy that could very well make the jump to the Bruins at some point, but he's likely heading to Providence for another season, but certainly someone to watch. Definitely showing that offensive ability that he demonstrated as a member of the Oshawa Generals and the Windsor Spitfire back in his OHL days. Another prospect is a guy that comes to the Bruins by way of the OHL, and that's Jackson Edward. He is a guy that, if he makes it to the Bruins, could become a fan favorite along the same lines as what I expect to see out of Nikita Zadorov this season. Plays a very physical game, loves to get under the opponent's skin, and again, plays similar to Zadorov. He's a very big boy, 6'3", 191 pounds. He was a 7th round pick of the Bruins back in 2022. Last season with London, 59 games played, 7 goals, 23 assists for 30 points to go along with 92 penalty minutes. The London Knights won the OHL championship, and he contributed 2 goals, 9 assists in 15 playoff games. Again, not known as an offensive guy by any means. He's a guy that steps up, never backs down from a hit or a physical play. When he played for London, could be a bottom pair defenseman in the NHL, but there's a lot to like about his game, and excited to see what he can do at the AHL level. Thirdly, Riley Duran. He did only play a couple games over the weekend, but if you listen back to guys that I said to keep an eye on at this Prospects Challenge, Duran was one, Farinacci was another, and he played a very solid couple of games in Buffalo. Riley Duran did. And he's got a high motor, drives to the net, not really much fear when it comes to creating scoring chances for himself and his teammates. A fast skater, plays well in all 3 zones, and showed a real pop in the offensive zone as well. He plays the style that the Bruins like, and Farinacci, perhaps Harrison, could be among guys who are called up from the AHL in the event of injury and such. Again, Farinacci kind of an under the radar prospect, perhaps signed as an undrafted free agent in 2023. A very solid two-way game, good in the faceoff dot, and that's what the Bruins need at this point from their some of their prospects who could play in depth role. Just to go back to Edward for a moment, Providence head coach Ryan Mugano was quite impressed by the defenseman, who is likely to make his pro debut in Providence this season. Mugano said they've really enjoyed watching Jackson grow. He's another guy that Adam McQuaid has spent a lot of time with, both on and off the ice, and they're excited about him as a person. And he thinks there's a lot of growth with somebody like that that's super inquisitive and wants to get better. The aggressive part, playing hard, that's the fabric of being a Bruin. And Mugano said he looks like a Bruin to me. Edward, a prototypical, hard-nosed, hard-hitting skater who will fit in perfectly with the Bruins organization. Whether or not he jumps up to the NHL level at some point remains to be seen, but he is exactly what you want from a Bruins defenseman, and that's what they went out and acquired in Nikita Zadorov this past offseason. So those are my thoughts on the Prospects Challenge that has been wrapped up. Tomorrow, we will kick off training camp. So on tomorrow's episode, we'll do more of a training camp preview and what you need to watch in camp. Of course, the Jeremy Swayman story continues to dominate, and we'll do our daily Sway update here as the podcast continues. So Jeremy Swayman remains without a contract here as we get ready for training camp to begin on Wednesday. And Fluto Shinzawa had a piece in The Athletic this morning titled, "Why Jeremy Swayman Megabucks Contract Has to Wait." He writes, "I think Jeremy Swayman will be as good as Andrei Vasilevsky. Swayman is fast, quick, smart, composed, and competitive. He may not be as show-stopping as Vasilevsky, but he doesn't have to be. Swayman excels at positioning himself for square, efficient saves. You may think then that Swayman deserves Vasilevsky's $9.5 million contract annually, which would be on par with what Charlie McAvoy is making as the second highest paid player on the Bruins." Fluto continues, "Indeed, you may think that because the Lightning ace signed 5 years ago, Swayman deserves even more. Salary cap is $88 million this season. It was $81.5 the first season of Vasilevsky's blockbuster. However, Swayman does not deserve that, according to Fluto. Quote, Vasilevsky was 25, the same age as Swayman is now when he signed his Megabucks deal, but Vasilevsky had banked 2 regular seasons of number 1 play, and in one of them, he won the Vezina Trophy. Swayman has never been a regular season number 1. It would be all well and good if organizations paid purely on projected performance. By that measure, Swayman's AAV should be $11.5 million. The league's reality, however, is that past performance, not just for an individual, but for his peers, influences future value. David Pastrnak, Charlie McAvoy know this better than most. In 2019, McAvoy was a few days late arriving to camp without a contract, and Zach Werenski of the Columbus Blue Jackets had signed a 3-year, $15 million contract prior. And then using that as a comparable, McAvoy signed a 3-year, $14.7 bridge deal. Pastrnak missed a day of training camp, unsigned back in 2017, and agreed to a 6-year, $40 million second deal, which was on par with Philip Forsberg at the time. When it comes to Swayman, there's no goalie in terms of age, career performance, and contract status that Don Sweeney and agent Louis Gross can use to frame their negotiations. Because, again, with all the promise that Swayman has and everything that he has done up to this point, there's still the question that he has not carried the load as a number one goaltender. Swayman's ask, according to Elliot Friedman, is $9.5 million, what McAvoy earned on his third contract. And by the time he signed, he had been the Bruins' number one defenseman for 3 straight seasons. Bruins next season as the Bruins' number one goalie will be his first. So in that way, the Bruins hold the upper hand. Now, Swayman is kind of lucky because after his 2023 arbitration hearing, Sweeney had the choice of a 1 or a 2-year deal. Had Sweeney chosen the latter, Swayman would be in the fold for $3.475 million for this season. But part of the reason Sweeney picked a 1-year deal was to acknowledge to Swayman that he would outgrow his award. They were willing to revisit that price point, but only to a point. Swayman is restricted. The Bruins can stand firm on a number closer to $6.4 million, which is the AAV John Gibson landed from the Anaheim Ducks as a 25-year-old in 2018. Obviously, again, Swayman's acknowledged he's more informed and he has learned more about the business of the game, how the cap has grown since then, and how it's projected to grow. But playing hardball is a difficult choice for the Bruins considering Ullmark is gone and they don't really want to play games with Joonas Korpisalo and Brandon Bussi as their tandem. Maybe the Bruins can go up to $7 million annually, but shorter term, a 2-year deal at $7 million would allow Swayman to bump up his resume and become a free agent looking for those big bucks. But the Bruins want that sample size of him. Again, when you're looking at evaluating prospects, players, you need that sample size of taking the job and running with it. Now, a 2-year deal would let Swayman walk to unrestricted free agency, and the Bruins don't want this. There's been some bitterness that has grown up. There has been, perhaps some resentment from arbitration, from this process. So maybe a 4-year deal would be better. 4 years, $28 million would make him the 5th highest paid goalie in the league. He'd be 29 for his big UFA swing, and he could get a massive deal at that point. That's probably what the Bruins are looking to achieve at this point per Fluto Shinzawa. A 4-year, $28 million contract will make him the 5th highest paid goalie in the league. He'd be 29 as a UFA, and the Bruins would be at the head of the line to give him a massive payout. The Bruins have proven to be generous when the time is right. Only 3D were earning more than McAvoy when he signed his current contract. Pastrnak became the 5th highest paid forward when he nabbed his $11.25 million deal. But those guys had played at elite levels at their position for quite some time. It's different with goalies, especially with Ullmark having been in the fold. Fluto argues Swayman's time has yet to come. You can agree with that. You can disagree with that. The Bruins are holding to that. At this point, it seems Swayman wants to get paid. Keep in mind, December 1st is not only my birthday, but that is the definitive deadline for when Swayman can sign. If he doesn't sign by that point, he can't play hockey this season. If the Bruins go into this season with a Korpisalo Bussi tandem, that's that could be a reason why this team falls out of the playoff picture, to be quite honest. So that really can't happen. All right, that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Please do subscribe if you have not already. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL, where the local experts keep you updated daily on all the biggest storylines ahead of this season. Find Locked On NHL and Locked On Boston Bruins on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.